Hi, and welcome to Conversations in Interventional Cardiology. My name is Andy Goldsweig, and I'm an interventional cardiologist at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha, and an associate editor of JSCAI, the Journal of the Society for Cardiovascular Angiography and Interventions. I'm honored to represent JSCAI and our editor-in-chief, Dr. Alexandra Lansky. You can find us online at jscai.org, that's JSCAI.org, and follow us on Twitter at @myjscai, @myjscai. JSCAI is the home of all official SCAI documents. We're here today to discuss an important recent publication in JSCAI, evaluation of the OpSens OptoWire 3 and novel TAVR algorithm to measure pressure gradient during TAVR. I'm joined by an esteemed panel of internationally renowned experts. We have Dr. Philippe Généreux, first author of the paper and co-director of the Structural Heart Program at Morristown Medical Center in Morristown, New Jersey. We have Dr. Tammy Atkinson, interventional cardiologist at the Portland VA Medical Center, an assistant professor at the Oregon Health Sciences University, and Dr. Rihal, chair of the Division of Cardiovascular Diseases at Mayo Clinic. Welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining. Let's start with a question directed to Dr. Généreux. In this paper, your work with the OptoWire provides really an important new tool for the quantification of aortic stenosis. So to start, could you just summarize your group's findings for our listeners?
Absolutely. So thanks a lot, Andrew, for the kind invitation and JSCAI for the opportunity to publish our findings. So indeed, our paper target the validation of the OpSens left ventricular pressure guide wire. So the objective of this work was really to establish the degree of agreement between the gradient measure with the OpSens OptoWire before and after TAVR and its new TAVR algorithm. So the OpSens wire is used for FFR currently, but now we'll be using it for TAVR before and after to evaluate aortic stenosis. And we want to compare this to the standard evaluation with two pigtail technique and also TTE and TEE before and after TAVR. So what we did actually was really in one center at Morristown Medical Center. We took 20 TAVR, consecutive TAVR, and all patients, the 20 patients had before the TAVR, a TTE, a TEE, and a two pigtail assessment for the gradient with the OpSens wire also, and we repeated after. So we did a lot of measurement before and after, all in the same setup during the TAVR, and we had a core lab assessing the result. And the key was really the primary point was really to compare the final post-TAVR mean gradient between the Opto 3 wire from OpSens and the hemodynamic value derived by two pigtail. And the key here was really to validate the algorithm, because we know the OpSens wire with in the corner is the 014 is good to measure the pressure. We know that, but we want to see if there's a new algorithm with a dedicated console for TAVR or for structural heart, as a matter of fact, will work. So this is actually the setup. We will use the regular 014 OpSens wire with one sensor, the optical sensor of Fidela. And this is the screen that we have. It's very exciting. This new actually console dedicated to aortic stenosis with a live monitoring of the gradient during the case and after, obviously, and also some metrics of measurement for aortic insufficiency. So this is the setup. So we were doing a typical TAVR. We're doing a root shot first. Then we were crossing the valve, measuring the gradient with two pigtail, two transducer. We were using then after that the sensor of the OptoWire. And then we did the TAVR successfully in all case. We remeasured the gradient with two pigtail again. And then after that, we put the OpSens wire to have the gradient. And then we did a root shot for the AI. So the finding is really that the gradient before TAVR with the OptoWire was around 35 plus minus 14, was very almost identical to the two pigtail, so also 35 plus minus 14, with an absolute mean difference of 2.2, with a very, very strong correlation. So very reassuring. The OptoWire in this new console and algorithm was mimicking two pigtail measurement, which could be seen as very reassuring. And post-TAVR, which I believe is even more important, with a gradient or lower, so and very important to be precise. The OptoWire 3 had the same, almost the same gradient, 2.8 compared to 2 pigtail 2.2, with very strong correlation again, 0.89, and a mean difference of barely 1.2. So very good news before and after. And this is really summarize what the consoles show you during a case where you have a continuous gradient on the console before. And then after that, when you do TAVR, you can assess also immediately the gradient after. That showed very good correlation and no significant difference. So why we did that? Well, the key here was not really to validate the OpSens wire. Obviously, I think you can use the 014 wire to assess AS if you want. We can discuss that in the discussion before and after. But the key was really a preamble to the 035 wire that I'm sure we can talk about, that is coming on the market. It has been approved in Canada actually 2 weeks ago, where we completed 20 patient approval study, and FDA is reviewing currently, where you have an 035 wire, kind of Confida Safari-like, very safe, dedicated shape with actually pacing capacity and also continuous monitoring of the gradient. So really 3-in-1, you can deliver the valve, you can pace on the wire and the LV wire pacing, and also take the gradient. So the work that we did with the 014 wire was not only to prove that we can use this to assess the AS, but also as a first step to validate the algorithm, which will also be validated in the Canadian study that will be presented actually at EuroPCR in a couple of days by Joseph Rodescabo. So I'm going to stop here and happy to discuss and entertain questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Généreux. That's a really impressive technology, and it's a very impressive validation of the technology. I think we're all pretty excited about that. Let me turn to Dr. Atkinson. Dr. Atkinson, last year you published a SCAI quality improvement tip about invasive assessment of aortic stenosis and looked at all sorts of methodologies to assess aortic stenosis. How do you think that the 014 pressure wire might fit into the universe of tools and techniques available to quantify aortic stenosis? How will this technology fit into interventional cardiologists' workflow, or how should it fit in? And then what are your thoughts on the possibility of expanding this technology to the 035 diameter?
Okay, well, first, I wanted to say thank you for this invitation, and just to congratulate Dr. Généreux and his team for a nicely done study and some very exciting technology. I was really excited when I got to read this paper. And so looking at the tips from last year, some of the tools that I think, the 2-pigtail technique, which is our standard, it's a little bit more cumbersome. It takes multiple access points. And so I think where I've gone to is using the pressure wire assessment. And actually, Dr. Rihal had actually written the feasibility of using pressure wire assessment back, I think it was 2006 or so. And that's what I've adopted in the last year. So when I saw the OpSens wire and the TAVR algorithm, I thought this would be extremely useful in the cath lab in looking at our patients who were trying to define severe AS. I think in the TAVR procedure, as TAVR operators, we're always trying to improve efficiency and the safety of the procedure. And, not all of us do post hemodynamics. I do routinely on all of our TAVRs, but I don't think that that's completely been widely adopted. So I think using an 014 at the end of a TAVR is not necessarily going to be widely adopted, but the promise of this being embedded into an 035 wire, well, I think that's where the game changer is. I mean, having a TAVR wire that you could pace, that you could measure hemodynamics, I think that would be widely adopted. I know I'd be signing up for that wire right away. I personally think that the benefits of looking at the hemodynamics at the end of the TAVR are very important. Sometimes we don't always get good TTE windows, so our AI assessment isn't always as good. And so being able to look at the aortic regurgitation index, I think with the discordance that we have between our echo measurements and our invasive measurements, I think having that data after the TAVR is very important, just especially when you're following up on your transthoracic echoes and your gradients may be off or elevated. And, also I think it makes key decision points when you're looking at valve-in-valve TAVRs and you want to measure the post-hemodynamics. And is this something that we should be doing a fracture after, or do we need to be further aggressive with our ballooning? So I really think that this technology is going to completely impact the way that we do TAVR. Really, it's all about simplifying and improving our efficiency, but also improving the safety for our patients.
Excellent. Dr. Rihal, anything to add in terms of how this wire will fit in, will expand the capabilities in TAVR?
Well, so I completely agree with Dr. Atkinson's comments. And if you look at the history of interventional cardiology, the technologies that are adopted in a sustained manner are those that make our and our patients' lives more efficient, easier, and safer. And so with fewer exchanges, one wire that can do it all, it just doesn't have an ultrasound probe on it. That's the only thing it's missing. And so things that make our procedures more efficient, easier to do, inherently are better and will get adopted. So I completely agree with that assessment.
So let me ask you, you've been working in the transcatheter aortic valve replacement space from really the early days of TAVR technology. And obviously now we see more and more tools coming out like the OptoWire with dedicated purposes to improve and facilitate TAVR. With TAVR really becoming a mature technology now, what do you see, or what would you like to see in terms of the future of the field? What's on your wish list for technological improvements?
Oh, thanks. That's a great question. And you're right. It's been an amazing journey to see us going from a procedure where there were 20 people in the room, general anesthesia, heart-lung bypass machine parked outside the door just in case, to a procedure that's now conscious sedation. Patients literally can talk through it and are home the next day. Having said that, I think there's still plenty of room in this procedure and most of our procedures for technological and procedural improvement. So for example, large bore entry and exit still hasn't been perfectly solved, right? I mean, we all use a variety of closure devices, but yeah, it would be nice to have some sort of integrated device that when we come out, you get safe, reliable closure 99.9% of the time. We're still not quite there. Delivery in, the straightforward TAVR, sure, it's a 20-minute procedure and everyone feels good about it. But, the cases that we spend a lot of time thinking about and worrying about are those that have poor access. And yes, there's lots of alternative access, but what you asked what I'm interested in, one thing I'm very interested in is transseptal procedures. And we're about this close to being able to do safe, reliable transseptal TAVR, but we're not there yet. We do need some better tools to help us do that. And I think, Philippe, you have published or at least tweeted a great case, and we've published a case, and I know others have done these. But the people who were involved in TAVR in the very, very early stages, they cringe when you talk about transseptal TAVR because, because of the disasters that had happened. But, we've moved on since then. And at least in my opinion, any interventional cardiologist who's facile with mitral clips and TAVR can easily combine the building blocks of those two procedures. So then if you think about it, we have a transvenous procedure with a radial art line, and that's it. And so one process improvement I think we ought to be working towards as a field is same-day discharge. And so, we rarely do that, but we have developed criteria where the risk of pacing is extremely low over the next month, never mind the next 12 hours, and the access site looks good. We can quickly scan them with ultrasound. Why not send them home the same day, right? So I think we as the operators also need to get into the mindset that this has to become more and more like outpatient PCI. Whether or not we'll ever be doing it in outpatient labs with no surgery on site. Again, I was around when we first started doing PCI without surgery on site, and that created a huge furor. But if you look at the data critically and look at the morbidity and mortality after these procedures, a lot of PCIs are higher risk than TAVR now. Yeah. So risk stratification, selection, not just of high-risk patients, but selection of low-risk patients, I think is really important. And if we take that sort of approach, to our patients, I think we can continue to improve this procedure and make it slicker, better, safer, easier to do.
That's a lot of great points, a lot wrapped up into that. I want to pick up on what you said about low-risk patients. In particular, I think the future is low-risk patients, right? At this point, we've tackled the inoperable, the high risk, the intermediate risk, and we've tackled the low-risk patients who are above a certain age. But there are still patients out there for whom surgical aortic valve replacement, particularly with a mechanical valve, may be an option. And so just going to throw some thoughts out there, see what Dr. Atkinson, Dr. Généreux think. First, at some point, maybe a mechanical valve might be in the future of TAVR, right? It's a possibility, something that would last longer. Alternatively, can the bioprosthetic valves be designed to last longer and to really facilitate valve in valve, that is TAVR in TAVR? The original transcatheter heart valves were not designed to have a second one put inside them, right? But now that we're performing these procedures in young enough patients, we really need that. In particular, there's a procedure out there called Basilica, right? And it's not a very simple one, and it's not a very low risk one, but as our low risk TAVR patients age and potentially need transcatheter valve in transcatheter valve, maybe a dedicated catheter to lacerate those leaflets is in order. So let me talk less and get some thoughts from others. Dr. Généreux, what's on your wish list? What's coming?
Well, you touched a very good point. The only thing I will add with Dr. Rihal, and I agree with this transeptal, I think we're very close to be able with a dedicated sheet. The only thing is you need to park it like a microclip-like sheet and just do the curve, and this is done. And I agree, we're so close. We did 4 cases. The last one, it didn't go well. We're so close, but we need a dedicated sheet, and I beg company to do this. You touched a point about leaflet modification. I think the next era we're going to enter is a leaflet modification, and there's at least 3 dedicated devices upcoming in early phases with very good result or promising result to modify prosthetic leaflet. One is called Shortcut. They did a couple of cases in Europe and very good result to kind of open the leaflet in front of the left main or the RCA. The next step will be to remove the leaflet. It sounds crazy. You don't need to remove all the leaflet. You just need to remove the problematic part. So I think in the next 10 years, what's really exciting is to enter the era of leaflet modification, whatever the shape or form it will take. And like Dr. Rihal said, the transeptal TAVR, because carotid, transaxillary, transcaval, et cetera, is okay. A lot of stroke complication. This transeptal, I think, could be mainstream. So that's my part. As far as a mechanical valve transcatheter, I need to think about that. I don't like blood thinner, so that's my problem. But we'll see.
Yes, I was trying to imagine how we'd get the mechanical valve in there too. My big thing is I'm just waiting for this new wave of THV and THV because it's coming. And so, things that make that easier for us and how to optimize our current valves for putting in the next ones, because I just see this wave coming and trying to prepare for that. And so I think any technology that can advance the way that we treat, transcatheter valve prosthetic stenosis is going to be the next big thing too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Généreux, Dr. Atkinson, Dr. Rihal. We're thrilled to include this important document in the 3rd issue of JSCAI, and we're really thrilled to share this discussion with our incredible panel on jscai.org, as well as JSCAI Twitter. That's at myjscai, at MYJSCAI. Really great to speak with you all, and looking forward to many more JSCAI endeavors with you.